Hi, students. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. So, I remember bringing something like this video here, where Crystal Black was talking about Arab slavery and how slavery happened, and how they are, especially these people, are actually very quick to tell people that look like me that are Africans were the ones that sold them out, especially where there is a reparation or a conversation of how slavery happened, or how when black people are trying to hold them accountable for some certain things that happened to them. The best you hear from them is that they tell you that your people sold you out, so go tell them to pay your reparations, or hold them responsible for what happened. And it's not just only white people that say that. Also, I have heard black conservatives use that on black people, right? So this particular man came out to tell Crystal Black that she did not make research. When people come out to counter what you are saying, especially when it comes to research, you are expected that they come out with their own research to prove to you that what you are saying is not correct, right? But he did not come out with any research, but he was just very busy to counter what Crystal Black was talking about, right? And where she was also saying that it was never written anywhere that Africans sold them away from here to, and that it was just a word of mouth. And she also put out her own articles on where she got like everything she got and all that. But something that I am going to say is that Arab slavery is something that we do not even talk a lot about. But you know what? Let's get into this video.
So y'all know how they say that Africans sold other Africans into slavery, resulting in us. Has anybody asked what the proof of that was? Well, I did, and I did some research. They're basing those allegations off of written testimony from slave traders, one of which is a book that was sold. And the tone of the book was written in a type of way so that those in the other countries who were participating in the slave trade could now say they weren't doing anything wrong because the Africans were already doing it, and that African kingdoms are the ones who sold them. The only thing that they have supposedly from African leaders are these letters that they sent to different countries. And it's not many letters, it's like 2 or 3, saying that we would like to engage in this slave trade. So we're going to believe written testimony from slave traders? They also said that it was in the oral traditions to talk about this and pass the stories around because African people didn't write things down, is what they say. And it is an oral tradition. Even black people here do it. That is a type of African thing that they do. But even that's fishy. And again, we have to remember that the slave trade of African people was very well alive and thriving because of the Arabs. The Arabs already had set up slave markets and everything. It was already prepared for the Europeans. So explain to me why Europeans would need to go to African leaders to negotiate for slaves that were already available. It's not adding up because they say that African people don't write, but also the kings and queens of African kingdoms, 2 or 3 of them wrote letters and off of written testimony from slave traders.
You really didn't do any research, sis. I'm sorry to say. You didn't. You didn't. You looked at one thing. You found that one thing that happened in Congo and Angola. And you see that they did have correspondence with the King of Portugal, King Afonso, who converted to Catholicism in the 1500s. He actually petitioned the Pope as well as the King of Portugal, I forget who it was at that particular time, to limit and at one point even to stop slave trading in the area. But that's one situation. That's in the 1500s. You can't sum up a whole entire thing, whole entire trade in a few sentences. And then the thing you said about the Arabs, there were no Arabs on the western coast of Africa trading slaves, not to speak of. There was no reason for them to be there. There was no reason. The market on the west coast of Africa developed because of Europeans, and the demand, made the supply available. It's not like people just sitting in fucking Lagos waiting to be sold off. There was no reason to have a slave factory or a bunch of slaves in Lagos, which is on the coast of Nigeria. There was no reason for that. There was no reason for these kingdoms that like the homemade to even exist. The slave trade with the Arabs, though it lasted a lot longer, we're not talking about something that it lasted longer and it had more and it involved more people, but it lasted so much longer that its effects was a lot different. It was more of a gradual thing because there was no huge market. There was no plantation system that necessitated millions of slaves like what happened in the New World, what happened in Brazil, what happened in the Caribbean. You didn't have that in the Arab world. And then you had other sources of slaves as well, like a lot of people like to point out the Slavs and all that. But just on some real shit. And it's amazing, man. I'm just amazed because you really didn't. You ain't looking at it at all. I mean, I would love to see this book that you're talking about. I'm assuming you're talking about Mongol Park. And that Mongol Park was like in like 200 years after Alfonso. That was in the River Gambia. That's where you get the root story. That's where Alex Haley actually got his information from, as far as like the place, Jufa St. James Island, which is now Kunta Kinte Island and all that. No, we're not talking about something that was some goddamn, like it just happened and yeah, they went back and they trying to write it down because they don't want us to. Man, no, they had no fucking clue that this day right here was going to ever come. They just was making money. It was a commercial enterprise. That's how come there's so many records about it, because it was commerce. These are receipts. This is real shit. This ain't somebody making up to make you feel bad. We need to get off this stupid shit. See, because why would they lie about this? Man,
41 to 24.
I hate to be like that, man. I hate to be like this, but I'm just tired, man, because, like, perhaps I need to have a conversation with somebody because I just see all this bullshit and people like it. People like it. I have people coming to me all the time like, nah, but have you ever heard of it? Yes, I've heard of it. Yes, and what's next? What are we going to talk about? Oh, even if I haven't heard of it, it can be explained. It's not like I'm a fucking mastermind. I ain't nothing but a regular nigga from Virginia. But at the same time, I've been doing it for a while, so yeah, I've heard of a lot of shit. I've read about a lot of shit, but no, there's nothing fishy about the goddamn slave trade if you actually research it. And if you just do it on the periphery, just want to look around and point out things, you can find a whole lot of holes in it. But look up Kingdom Borno. Look up the slaves. The slaves in Kingdom Borno, they're the ones who went to the fucking, to the Arabs. They're the ones who went to the Arabs. The ones in Gayo and Songhay and Timbuktu. But when the trade shifted to the western part of the continent, when the trade shifted to European interests, that's when it changed. That's when it became European. It's not some magical trick, man. Come on, we gotta do better than that. Big up Virginia. You said that they got it from slave traders. That's what I forgot to hit on. You get stuff from Alfonso. Yes, you do.
We have land here over
They didn't get it from anywhere. When you say they got it from, you're implying that somebody looked at the history and decided to write it down now. No, those records were kept then. Look up Puerto Jalón. Look up Elmina Castle. Look up St. James Island. You got to understand. Look up the homemade. We're not talking about something that happened over a 20-year period. Since we're talking about something that happened over 300 years. That's longer than there's been a United States. 300 years ago is longer than there has been a United States. United States this year will be, 249 years old. 300 years. We're talking about the trade. And you don't know, don't nobody know who the hell George Washington, how often he took shits? Don't nobody know that? You know what I'm saying? You're talking about something that lasted for 300 years. And you're summing it up like, they trying to hide it? Bullshit, man. Big up Virginia.
Testimony from slave traders.
You really didn't do any research, sis. I'm sorry to say. You didn't. You looked at one thing. You found that one thing that happened in Congo and Angola. And you see that they did have correspondence with the King of Portugal, King Alfonso, who converted to Catholicism in the 1500s. He actually petitioned the Pope, as well as the King of Portugal, I forget who it was at the particular time, to limit and at one point even to stop slave trading in the area. But that's one situation. That's in the 1500s. You can't sum up a whole entire thing, whole entire trade in a few sentences, you know. And then the thing you said about the Arabs, there were no Arabs on the western coast of Africa trading slaves, not to speak of. There was no reason for them to be there. There was no reason. The market on the west coast of Africa developed because of Europeans, and the demand, you know, made the supply available. It's not like people just sitting in fucking Lagos waiting to be sold off. There was reason to have a slave factory or a bunch of slaves in.
Well, hello there. You're absolutely incorrect. First of all, I don't appreciate you attempting to insult my intelligence by saying that I didn't do any research. When I get up at 1:30 a.m. every morning, I research for 3, 4, 5 hours about this shit. You're absolutely incorrect. The sub-Saharan slave trade initiated by the Arabs kidnapped black people from West African countries and transported them to North Africa, where they castrated the little boys, put the little girls and the women into harems and into prostitution. 2/3 of the black slaves that they were transporting were women and girls. More of them died on that transport than with the transatlantic slave trade because it was by foot and camel caravan. That started in the 7th century, long before European conquest. My point is it was easier for this slave trade of the transatlantic slave trade because a slave trade had already been put up by the Arabs, who got a big portion of black people from West Africa. And honestly, it started in 4000 BCE by an Egyptian king who was raiding Sudan. And they try to tell you, if you go look up Egyptian races, that the race categories don't fit with today's time because there was a mixture and they didn't consider themselves anything. But the reality is that it was Arab conquest. And I'm sorry, black people, y'all gonna hate this, but we have to let go that every Egyptian pharaoh was black. It's not true. The Arabs were colonizing. Sudan was black and a powerful empire, and they ended up conquering Egypt. Be proud of black people. You don't have to claim Egypt. The sub-Saharan region where the Arabs were taking black enslaved people touches West Africa. And as you can see here, even in 1332 to 1406, the Tunisian Arab historian wrote that only peoples to accept slavery are the Negroes because of their lower degree of humanity, their place being closer to the animal stage. And as you can see here, the Arab slave trade was characterized by appalling violence, castration, and rape. The men were systemically castrated to prevent them from reproducing and becoming a stock. This inhumane practice resulted in a high death rate. 6 out of 10 people who were mutilated died from their wounds in castration centers. The Arab slave trade also targeted African women and girls who were captured and deported for use as sex slaves. They did this after they conquered North Africa. And the Berbers, the so-called indigenous people of North Africa, joined them in their conquest to capture African people. You are giving information that is easily disputed with facts. When you look this up, you have to say, where were the enslaved people kidnapped from during the sub-Saharan slave trade, not where they were transported to. There were slave ports, and the slavery of black people has been happening since 4000 BCE. There are records of it, proud records of it. And it got worse when Muhammad started Islam. After he had his vision, the reality is, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, the spread of Islam is what spread African slavery. Let's be very clear. And Muhammad, while he didn't encourage slavery, he owned slaves himself. He even wifed a slave that was given to him as a gift. What he said was, treat your slaves kindly and give them gifts instead of freeing them. And if you free them, do it for an atonement of a sin, because apparently the sin wasn't owning slaves. And if you think these slaves wasn't black, you crazy as hell. And the slave trade, by the way, has not ended. And it didn't officially end till 1960. Hear me clear, 1960, when it really didn't fucking end. Black people are still being kidnapped, marked as slaves. The slave trade was so bad that some African tribes, some would mark their daughter's face. It's called scarification, so that they would not be kidnapped. Now, scarification is not just for this. There are cultures that do scarification for beauty and all that. But the scarification for certain tribes was so that they could recognize their people as well if they were taken as slaves. What you're not going to do is come in here with your minimal research and demean me and say that I did not do my research when you're telling me that I only looked up 2 sources and I wasn't even talking about them. Then you're talking about letters written and all that kind of stuff. That's my point. How do you know they wrote it? Because on one hand, when you research it, it says that African people only have oral traditions, as if we couldn't fucking write. But when it's convenient for them, all of a sudden they can write letters and in English. That's what I'm saying. Shit don't add up. You're also leaving out that yes, there were African kingdoms that participated in the slave trade. And it can seem willingly, maybe some of them were. But what about the ones who were under threat? Because understand that the demand for enslaved African people began to increase, which was the same reason that the Portuguese stopped communicating and just started kidnapping African people. Arabs had been doing it long before, because you talked about the white people who were also caught and enslaved. You're absolutely correct. That's where their motherfuckers learned their tips and tricks to enslave African people. Clock that T. But as far as you getting on here making videos on me, do your research, because you couldn't even name the person you was trying to name. Where's your research? You trying to go by shit off the top of your head. I don't. I've been doing this for years. And by years, I don't just mean on this app. I mean, most of my life that I have lived at this point has been dedicated to researching and learning about Black people and our history. And when I did that and I got older, I dug further, because I realized that African Americans, we have a superiority complex. And we want to focus and narrow on just Black issues in America, when the entire history of African people, our torture, our enslavement, the graping that created a whole new group of people that barely recognizable, who claim Black, but really Arabs, because of those breeding camps, just like we had here. They were having those children, those Black African children were being forced to birth the babies of their rapists. So you do your research and come back to me when you have. But don't ever start no sentence off that way towards me. I'm trying to be respectful, I really am. But don't come at me with disrespect. It was absolutely no reason. Because you look on my page, my shit about Black issues, jokes or not. So unless your whole motherfucking page like mine is dedicated to Black issues, you have no right to come at me with your disrespectful ass tone and disrespectful ass words. That's a warning shot. 10 out of fucking 10.
So this is all like from this video, and I remember that I talked about this Arab slave trade, because sometimes I was like, we talk about African American, like chattel slavery and all that a lot, then forgetting about Arabs, right? And then I expanded on it, on how, like, Crystal Black was talking about how there is no written, or there is no place it says that Africans sold uh, people from here out there and all that. I'm just trying to be with my words, right? And that it is just something that was not documented or recorded, but this was like a word of mouth of what they told us or what they said. Because I remember that I have talked about how each time we try to hold them responsible about slavery, the first thing you hear from them is, or you talk about reparation, the first thing you hear from them is that you were sold by your people. So if there is anybody to hold, go hold your own people responsible for giving you away. This has always been their lines. It is not new, or neither is this something that most of you have not heard. I am sure you all may have heard these lines, right? So this particular man that came out to say that Crystal Black did not make any research. You know, when people do their own research and come out with their own result, and did you make your own result? Like, sorry, did you make your own research before coming out to speak on this? Because it's important you make your research instead of coming out to counter the person that made her own research and she is talking with proof, because you all saw the research where she put out talking about how the slavery happened and how some certain things affected people that look like people that were like, taken away, especially by the Arabs, and how they were made, especially when they grape, right? How they were made to, like, the women were made to give birth to the children and all that. See, I understand that some things are, I don't know how some people wake up and want to defend some certain things, and some people don't even make their own research to make sure, like, sometimes there are some stories we hear. The best you can do about it is to make research, or at least put in effort to find out what happened, how did it go, because if only you know how, especially some Black conservatives. I have also heard, was this Jeff Mead, Wolf Hart, and all that. I have heard them, Black people also heard them use that lines on Black people, telling Black people to quit talking about slavery. That if there's anybody to hold responsible about slavery, should be Africans, because they sold away their own people into slavery and all that. They are very quick to use that. Not only white people use it, people that look like me also use that. So this is where I'm going to draw the cut, and let me know what you all think, because I absolutely would love to read from you. Yes, bye for now.